not only as we study your word, but as we discuss our regional church, the Presbytery of the Northwest. We thank you for another good meeting, our spring meeting of the Presbytery, for the work that was done. And thank you for your grace to us. In Jesus' name, amen. Technology is not my friend today, so I don't have my notes written, but I do have the docket from our spring Presbytery meeting, so I'm going to have to rely upon some of the memory of some of the others who are there with me. And all the hard questions you can ask Mike, because he was our designated elder for the meeting. So. But myself and Melissa, Mike, and our 2 men under care went to Seattle area for our Presbytery meeting. Our meeting finished on Friday. They can run into Saturday. We didn't have the occasion to do that. And just to kind of give you a background of the things we went through, or some of the highlights, we won't spend a ton of time doing that. But we always start our meetings out with times of prayer for the churches. And so each of the churches puts out prayer requests and praises, things that are going on in the different congregations. So we spend some time at the beginning praying for those things, praying for the churches. Before we go into the official business of the meeting, as we kind of went into the meeting, we have different committees that are our standing committees. The committee on arrangements is just basically the host church telling us kind of what the facilities are. We have to approve minutes from the previous meeting, so we had to approve our September minutes. We do have a treasurer's report that talks about budgeting items. We are quite a ways under budget. I can't remember how far, if anyone else has. What?
30 grand.
About 30,000 under where we were last year at this time, as far as giving. And that also is a reminder that in May, for our Deacons Fund offering, the third Sunday of the month, that offering will be set aside to go to the Presbytery of the Northwest. So we will be sending funds in for that from our congregation, as well as the amount that we set aside in our budget this year to do that, to help our Presbytery. The clerk gives a report. The stated clerk's report deals with things like, who's going to General Assembly. Since our fall meeting where we elect our slate of commissioners for General Assembly, and we have 4 ministers and 3 elders that we can have at General Assembly. 2 of the ministers could not go in June, so those were replaced since the last meeting with one was an alternate, and then another volunteer that could go to that. And then also the stated clerk has to report new members for the role of the regional church. So we've got a church plant going in Eugene, Oregon. So those members, it's not a particular church yet. So those members are on the role of the Presbytery. They're on the role of the regional church as well as ministers. So my membership is in the Presbytery. Questions so far, how we do things? All right. Standing committee reports. Regional church missions. Some of the reports that go into that were the things that we were dealing with. Talking about support from our denomination. Currently we have no mission works that are receiving support from the OPC. In fact, we officially voted for the dissolution of the mission work in Klamath Falls. They had stopped meeting in December, but we have to take action as a Presbytery. Like I said, we still have the one mission work, that Reformed Bible Study in Eugene, Oregon. Churches are also, or our denominational standing committee talks about church revitalization. We did discuss that as well, regarding home missions, the idea of setting up a fund to be able to help existing churches who might need some financial assistance that wouldn't fall under home missions but would go under our visitation committee. So we established that we should do this, But now we have to do some bylaw changes in the fall in order to establish this and put it under our visitation committee. But that is to help some churches who might be struggling financially. And then also Home Missions and our regional church missionary is also working with existing churches as far as outreach, evangelism, things that churches can do to kind of revitalize a little bit. Our regional home missionary gave his report, not only in working with the work in Eugene. He and another minister primarily spend a lot of their time working with that, trying to get that to the point where they can call an evangelist and they're having worship services, but so they can have an evangelist on site and try to grow that church, and then eventually get denominational support. And then he's also now working with some of our existing churches, helping them with evangelism. Anything I missed on that? And Mike is on that committee, so he would have maybe a few more details.
Yeah, the only details I would add would be that that Eugene mission work, the reason it's not getting any funds yet is because they don't have a man called. Once they get a man called or they are bringing someone, then at that point, that's when the funds will start to get distributed. But you can only submit once a year, and then the criteria to qualify for the mission work has changed. So it's like we're just planting that seed to the Presbytery that the hope is by the fall meeting that they may have a man that can be on the field to have that be an official mission work. And then there's a church in Boise, Idaho called Well, and they've petitioned to become a part of the OPC, and that's been about a year now in the works. That's going quite well.
No pun intended.
Yeah, exactly. One of their ministers will be coming here in June to fill our pulpit. The reason that they are not coming into the OPC just yet is that their ministers don't meet the educational requirements for the OPC, so they are in seminary. Daniel's actually in class with one of their ministers. Pray for him as he has a L4, L5 disc issue right now that he's been laid up and still trying to do seminary, still trying to lead the church. Be in prayer for him. The other notable about that particular church is in 2027, we are hoping to do a camp out with not only them, but with Idaho Falls OPC Church, likely somewhere in the McCall-ish area. So the hospitality committee will be getting some information regarding that, but that's kind of already, that seed is planted, but trying to get some more Idaho brother, sister communications going. The church in Boise is also about the same size as this one. And they're extremely established, but they're still working through becoming more reformed Presbyterian and then the educational requirements. But I enjoyed the time with their minister, Ben, and he's a part-time looking to become full-time. So if you have other questions, just come and grab me. I'm happy to answer.
And Josh Bales is the name of their lead minister that you can be praying for. Has had a lot of health struggles this year, in addition to the back issues right now. But
so is the focus of the Presbytery just by default moving to revitalization, or? Okay.
No, the revitalization, a church within our Presbytery petitioned the missions committee that they could possibly need some help. They're not there yet, but they have concerns where they're at. The revitalization is under the missions committee on the kimchi, on the denominational side. The question is this the work of the regional missions committee to be involved in revitalization? And through the committee, it was deemed no, that's not the call of that committee.
Okay.
And we felt it better fit with the visitation committee. The visitation committee,
which Ed is on.
yeah, they agreed. Yeah, And we all, I mean, on the missions committee, of course, we all want to help, but we don't want to see churches fail and close. But it's, on that particular committee, what's their goal? Where should they focus their attention?
Brett McNeil on the Regional Church Missions Committee also made a distinction between church revitalization and when a church is just having some financial troubles, right, and having some diaconal need almost. And so more of the church is having some financial troubles and diaconal needs, that's been placed under the visitation committee, whereas church revitalization, which they consider much more of, a church is almost going back to the point of being a mission church rather than an established church, even though technically it's still an established church, they're kind of in the position that a mission church would be, that would still be under regional church home.
Because denominationally, that revitalization falls under
Yeah.
home missions.
Yeah,
That's where the,
and that revitalization work
in.
would still fall under home missions for
Okay.
our community as well.
That
It's
makes
more the diaconal, we're in a tough spot financially, but we're still functioning as a particular church.
That makes sense.
That would be under visitation.
And that's where our regional home missionary is working with like 5 or 6 congregations, or will be working on efforts of outreach and evangelism type of things. Yeah. And I forgot already, did you mention Ben will be here on the 7th? Ben Rowell?
I didn't give the date. But
Okay, yeah,
yes.
June 7th, when we'll be at General Assembly. Chris and myself, Ben's going to come up from Boise for that weekend.
I'll be sort of disappointed to miss that.
I know. Get good recordings. The next committee was the Foreign Missions Committee. Have been a lot of changes in foreign missions of just people on the field coming off the field, some retiring or taking calls stateside, other people going onto the field. And as I mentioned, I believe recently in an email, there's a reason why I try not to name names when we have a prayer list, so every week you have a different missionary by name. Some of the places we can't name because we have a recording going. Okay, so there's places around the world where it is more difficult for missionaries to share the gospel. So I try to, knowing that we record every week and going, is this a country I can say or not? I try not to name names. So I encourage you, look in your prayer list for those specific names. I might list a nation or whatever, but I don't try to list a lot of names. One name that we can name is the gentleman who has been only for about a year now serving as I don't know what they call his title, not regional foreign missionary to Africa, Ben Hop.
The whole continent.
The whole continent of Africa. He's been serving, working with different Reformed denominations in that continent. Has now been called to be the Foreign Missions General Secretary. And so now he is working. Doug Clausen's resigning. Or retiring, excuse me, not resigning, retiring that position. And so right now, Ben and Doug are working together as of April 1st. That'll have to be kind of ratified and confirmed at this General Assembly, putting a new director for our foreign missions in place. So they are looking for other candidates to serve in different areas. But that's about all I can say about foreign missions right now where we're being recorded. As far as specific fields, the website, the OPC website will give you some specific information, but we'll delete the things you can't talk about online.
There's general information about each mission work on the back table too. About the majority of the mission work. There's a handful that aren't listed.
And if anyone's interested, like in missionary prayer cards, we can get more copies of those where you can take home and pray for the different missionaries that we currently have on the field.
The missions committee is also wanting more focus from particular churches in promoting short-term missions as well.
Oh, correct. Yeah, they're asking, that was one of the things that the denominational foreign missions committee is asking for presbyteries to kind of take on a field, take on an area, and kind of focus on that where they could do more short-term opportunities and serve in these particular manners.
That was pretty cool hearing that part, they mentioned two of the churches we've been praying for in Uganda that have been mission works for years are now fully on their own.
Yeah.
So
Correct.
They were
Yeah.
mission works supported by the OBC, and now,
Their particular churches.
yeah,
and
all native.
denominations.
Right now. It's pretty cool.
And the OPC, our philosophy of foreign missions, we're not creating the OPC in other countries. Besides North America, we have a couple churches in Canada. But we're not, having an OPC denomination in Africa or Asia or anywhere else. We are trying to help churches get self-supporting and have their own reformed denominations in these nations around the world. Okay, and then we partner with them and work with them in these different areas. Any other questions on foreign missions? Our Committee on Candidates and Credentials works with ministers in the Presbytery, ministers who are coming in, maybe taking calls of churches. Right now we have, as of June 30th, we will have 2 open pulpits. We did vote on, John Mahaffey is retiring as the pastor of Trinity Newburgh in Oregon. He's been serving there, I believe, 49 years. And he is retiring the end of June. And so how the process works, just like where congregations vote on a call to the minister, then the presbytery has to confirm that call, okay, and make sure that's a good fit for the church, and then the presbytery installs that minister, and we do the kind of the reverse. So if someone leaves a call or is retiring, then the congregation has to concur that the minister desires to either leave or retire, and then that comes to the presbytery where we dissolve that ministerial relationship because he's a member of that regional church. Okay, so we did that with Mr. Mahaffey. And so not only Trinity Newburgh will be open, but we still have an open pulpit in Portland, Oregon as well. The session at Trinity Newburgh has asked me to serve as their ministerial advisor beginning July 1. So I will be doing that. And a ministerial advisor is, you can't have a session meeting without a teaching elder. Okay, and a ministerial advisor helps that congregation during that time of transition, not only helps them with the official meetings that they need to have, but helps work with them on different issues going on in the church, consulting, helping them. They have already in the process of interviewing and issuing perhaps a call to a new minister that we might see. And Portland is also in the process of looking at someone as well, so we might have some new ministers coming in the fall. We're just not sure how those will come together yet. Yes?
Do we know if Trinity as a church has received John's retirement well, or if there's, I don't know if that's a question to ask.
Yes. Yeah, as far as I know. Yeah, this was not a shock. John's been preparing for this for several years and talking about it. He turned 80 this spring. So, yeah.
Yeah, what was it? He got the call in 1977, if I recall.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So they've been preparing. It wasn't like, oh, minister's leaving us. And so they've been thinking about this for some time. Correct. Yeah. But that's a good question.
Another thing to note about retired ministers is they don't just go away. So John will certainly still be active in the presbytery level, probably the denominational level. And there are a lot of men at Presbytery who really respect him after that many years of service. He has been a great help and wisdom to the church in this region and to the greater denomination where he served as assistant clerk for a long time.
Yeah.
Right. 23 years, I think he served as assistant clerk at the General Assembly. They've already many years in the past, or many years in the making, been looking for someone to take that role on. I'm not sure if we'll see at this General Assembly. He'll be stepping out of that role now, and Mr. Richardson, another minister, will be stepping into that role that's been assisting him for the last 4 or 5 years. Also in that committee, there was also a proposal brought forth. Didn't go very far at this meeting, but we do at the denominational level have a committee for ministerial care. So that will be continued to be discussed, and probably something at the fall meeting, more details on how to add that to our bylaws or set up and establish that committee, looking out for ministers in our denomination. We also, the committees, every year there's different people that come off committees, are elected to committees, usually at our fall meeting. We did have one gentleman who's moving to Florida, a retired minister, who submitted his resignation for candidates and credentials. The committee had a ruling elder in mind, and so that person was elected to fulfill his term. Anything else any of you who were there remember on candidates and credentials? All right. Diaconal ministries. A lot of the emphasis of that report was there's a regional summit that takes place with the denomination every couple of years. That's coming up, I believe, in June this year. And registration, encouraging any deacons that want to go to that. The registration costs and things are kind of paid for. And so our Presbytery committee wants to help any deacons that want to go to that national summit coming up. But the diaconal ministries also kind of looks in on any retired ministers, widows, those kind of things, just seeing what kind of needs are out there, and they kind of keep check on some of those things. And anything else on that committee, those who are there, okay? Ecumenicity, that's our committee that does interchurch relations, how we interact with different Reformed denominations. We had one report from one of our ministers who went to the Bible Presbytery meeting, and he shared, his time with them. So often at our different presbyteries, we'll get invited to different denominations, Presbyterian meetings. So whether it's the PCA, whether it's the Bible Presbyterians, other groups may invite us to different things. And so that committee will try to send a representative if we can, that will give some fraternal addresses. We did have two gentlemen that addressed us from different denominations. We had a gentleman from the URCNA and the ARP. So we had two different denominations represented. They were fraternal delegates coming to us from those denominations, shared about 5 minutes each, just kind of what's going on in their churches, to keep those communication lines open.
What's the ARP?
Associate
Reformed
Reformed.
Presbyterian churches? Yeah.
Yeah, they're primarily in the southeast. They have three churches on the west coast.
Or is it 3 churches west of the Mississippi?
It's
It's like,
Yeah. They're part of
Yeah.
the Mississippi Valley Presbytery. I hate their travels for Presbytery meetings.
so yeah, not a lot of churches in our area.
But their report on their foreign missions was good.
Anything on ecumenicity or questions about that? Judicial committee had a couple of items that we dealt with. One of these we spent a little bit of time kind of debating what to do. The first one, though, is we had received a report from another presbytery regarding a judicial matter that was sent to us kind of early on in our list of communications. And in that report was also a letter that was sent along with it stating some concerns about one of our ministers in our presbytery who was involved in some of this judicial case. What the committee recommended and what we ended up passing was just a letter to go out to that particular presbytery, just regarding them mentioning a minister by name in our presbytery without mentioning concerns without bringing any charges against that minister. I think it's the best way to put that without naming names. But.
Yeah, and the fact that it was sent out to all presbyteries, which would normally only be done after judicial proceedings have taken place.
Correct.
So it was public, but it should have started private.
Yes.
Correct. I mean, and that's the best way to kind of put that. So it was, hey, we have concerns about one of your ministers versus addressing the concern specifically. Yeah. So we just sent a letter back to them saying kind of wrong process. if you have concerns, the substance of those should be addressed first, right, and privately rather than publicly. The other was concerning overtures that are coming to the General Assembly. Now, a lot of times presbyteries may adopt an overture. Now, an overture is something they want to send off to the General Assembly saying, we would like you to take an action. Okay, so when I was in the Presbytery of New Jersey, we wanted the name changed to New Jersey and Puerto Rico, but we have to ask the General Assembly to do that. So we sent them an overture, and they considered it and changed the name. Other overtures are, hey, we think that we should start a study committee, okay, on different particular issues that are going on in the world or in church life. And so this particular action that we took, we had two different communications that came in from two different presbyteries. One presbytery is requesting the General Assembly to erect a study committee to study kinism. The other presbytery is overturing the General Assembly to reprint what the OPC already did. They had a study committee on race relations in 1974 is when the report came out. So there's like a 20-page report you can see online on race relations. The second presbytery said, we think that needs to be kind of republished, and then articles solicited for New Horizons that talk about these issues. So two different ways to kind of look at that. What we were dealing with was one of our ministers put forth a ground, and grounds are kind of like the reasons why you should support these overtures. So he's putting forth a ground that asking that we would add this to the Presbytery of Philadelphia's overture to erect a study committee. And I'll have to see if I'm smart enough here to pull up that thing, which would have been nicer on a bigger screen.
You got this.
But I think I can do that. Okay, I'm in the communications. Pausing for technical difficulties. Here we go. And I'm going to read what we debated this. Some of the changes that we made to this, I will try to remember as I'm reading through this, what we adopted. It was attached to the first overture regarding a study committee. We changed that to say any overtures that come to the General Assembly regarding the issue of kinism, we want this ground to be considered. So after a couple hours of debate and massaging the language, it says, well, the Presbyterian and Reformed tradition has faithfully defended the authority of Scripture and the unity of the church. It has not always been free from theological arguments that subordinated or ranked people according to race or ethnicity, that have informed practices abhorrent to the communion of saints, Westminster Confession of Faith 26:1, including in the writings of theologians such as Robert Louis Dabney and James Henley Thornwell. We, the church, therefore repudiate any appeal to such authorities to justify claims of racial or ethnic superiority, and reaffirm that all such claims must be judged by the Holy Scriptures alone, Westminster Confession of Faith 1:10. Such doctrines abuse clear biblical precedent by utilizing its language to organize races slash ethnicities in terms of superiors and inferiors, and contradict the larger catechism teachings on the Fifth Commandment, Westminster Larger Catechism 131 and 132, which requires the preservation of the honor, dignity, and equality of all humankind, body and soul, forbidding contempt and oppression which violates the moral laws confessed in our standards. So I think that was the final kind of reading. We didn't attach it to one specific overture, and then we did kind of added, we the church therefore repudiate, rather than just a we. So that'll be sent just as a letter of notification to the General Assembly as those committees first, and then the larger body will talk about those issues. So any questions about that? We did spend a lot of time on the afternoon on Friday, discussing that and talking about, one of the things in the OPC we like to do is argue about commas. We didn't get quite to that point where to put a comma, but we were getting close.
So there wasn't a support of doing a committee or just republicating, whatever the word is, of the old article. It was, please consider our position in this no matter what you do. Was that
correct? We weren't choosing one or the, well, most presbyteries don't have to send us notifications that they're sending an overture to GA. They just send it to GA. We just happen to get 2 of these letters, and if they come to your presbytery, then they're a communication. We don't have to do anything with the overtures. We're just informed, hey, these 2 overtures are coming to the General Assembly, and I guess our commissioners who are going to that assembly kind of know in advance before the docket comes out in the next week or so, that those things are going to be out there to be discussed at General Assembly. We just, as far as this additional ground, the language was proposed by a minister in the Presbytery who was asking that that be originally added to the first overture regarding erecting a study committee. But when he submitted that, we didn't know there was another overture at all, that other people were saying, oh, well, let's look at it this way versus that way. So all we did is change the request. Well, we changed that one language thing, but we changed the request to not attach it to this presbytery or the other, but just more information for, and how the overtures are handled first is they will go to an advisory committee. So when we get to General Assembly the first day, after we do preliminary things, Wednesday night we have a worship service, preliminary, set up our committees and things which are already assigned. Then Thursday we spend the bulk of the day in advisory committees meeting with all the different standing committees. So each overture will be assigned to different committees and they will talk about it. They will debate the merits, for or against, and then they'll bring proposals once it's brought to the floor of General Assembly. Usually overtures are Monday, I think. So after the weekend, or there's a time frame where it's an order of the day, but I forget where it is at, but early in the beginning of that week. And then the overtures need to be addressed, and so we need to discuss them as a body. So the advisory committee can say, hey, our advice is we do this over that. The body doesn't have to adopt that, but they're saying, here's why we think you should do this over that. Yeah.
Well, they may come up with something completely different.
Correct, or they could say, we don't think you should do either of those, we think you should do this third option instead. Because overtures can be rejected, they don't have to be,
Do they still have to go to
accepted.
the floor if they're rejected? The committee vote?
Correct, because committee can't, it's been submitted to the whole General Assembly. So a committee cannot veto it, they can say, we encourage you to vote no on this overture. They can say that, but then they still have to let everyone who's been commissioned to come there debate on the matter.
They offer, the advisory committees are there just to weigh the items that are before them and to offer advice on one or sometimes multiple ways for the General Assembly. Because occasionally you have minority reports.
Correct. Yeah, and even if you erect a study committee, you can get minority reports. So usually a committee is like 5 to 7 people, usually ministers and ruling elders. And then that committee, spends on average a couple years, but they report back to the next General Assembly, but it may take them a couple years to develop a report. But there could be someone on the committee that dissents with the action of the majority. They can write a minority report, and those can be considered on whether or not you adopt the minority versus the majority report. And that has happened in our history. I just can't recall what particular issues that has happened with. I don't remember. It could have been the Paedo Communion report, but I don't remember if the minority was adopted. I don't remember. No, not that one. You don't know.
I don't know.
I thought you were saying no. You were saying I don't know. I don't remember. Anything else on judicial matters or things about judicial things in the presbytery, how those are handled?
You just brought up Paedo Communion. Is there something to know about the OPC?
No, that was a report. I mean, we do have a report online that there was a study committee, and I don't remember when that one was, but that had already been dealt with. dealing with against Paedo communion.
Okay.
Yeah.
You were right, it was in 1987, the Federal Community Report in the OMC.
Okay, 1987,
It was a
so
minority
that's
report and a minority report.
correct.
Just
Yeah.
a few.
And I only remember that because I know the author of the minority report, so Dr. Leonard Coppas. Anything else on judicial matters? That's where things go to, like if they even came out of judicial matters, that can come out of congregations too. Complaints, appeals, if judicial cases in a congregation can go to the Presbytery as well. The next item was meeting facilitation. Now, we kind of plan ahead where we're going to meet. We were supposed to meet for our fall stated meeting this year at Trinity, Newburgh, Oregon, but with them having a minister retire after almost 50 years, and their facilities, they aren't really able to accommodate us this fall. And so the church in Olympia, Washington volunteered, and so we approved that change, that we'll be going to the Seattle area again, over to Olympia in the fall. Finance report. So we had a treasurer's report early in the meeting. The finance report then dealt with, we had to approve, every year we have to approve a audit of the books of the Presbytery. And so we have to prove what the auditors do as they look through our finances, our resources, make sure we're spending the money wisely. The other item that was brought up on our, that it needs to be looked into is regarding our insurance policy, because our spring meeting next year is in Canada, in Airdrie, just kind of north of us, about 7 hours. And so we need to look into whether or not we need some international coverage of some sort. So they're going to look into that before the fall meeting. And then encouraging those that want to make that spring meeting next year to make sure they have a passport before that. The visit to anything on finance, sorry. All right, visitation. Visitation committee, as I mentioned, Ed is on that committee. And you are on, what, I already passed your committee, didn't I? Ecumenicity, correct. So I'm the only one on the sessions not on a committee right now. I did tell a minister that I could help him out with some CMC, the Committee on Ministerial Care stuff, trying to get something established there. But yeah, I have my ministerial advisor position coming up in July. But visitation, two things that committee primarily looks at is examining sessional records. And so we have to take minutes of our session meetings every month, and we have to follow a certain format. We have to open and close in prayer, know who the moderator is, actions taken, record every time we have the Lord's Supper, every date of that, every date of every baptism, members coming in, members going out. All of those things need to be recorded in proper form. And so that committee looks over our minutes, and our clerk is Chris, and we got no exceptions and no notations. So our minutes are good. So that's a good thing.
Excellent.
We're gonna have to start recording.
You want
seconds.
good minutes. You want to know what happened. I mean, that's part of the history of your church, right? This is when happened when and what year this took place. So you want that. The other thing the visitation committee does is do visits to congregations. So they go around to every church over the course of a few years, and they kind of, what I like to say is they take the pulse. Okay, how's this church doing? How's their worship? How's the minister doing? How are the elders doing? Do they work well together? What's going on in the life of the church? Do you have disciplinary cases going on? What kind of studies are you doing? These kind of things. So they ask us a bunch of questions, and we met with the visitation committee back at the end of March. Is that correct? End of March. So they met with us for like an hour and a half. Asked us a bunch of questions, and I think we passed. So, yeah.
We wined and dined them, and
We wined and dined the committee, and we have an in on the committee, so it kind of helped us out a little bit. But no, but we just had a good time visiting with the brothers that came up. David Bass from Idaho Falls was there. Andrew Davis, and now I don't remember where he's at in Washington.
He's an
Kent.
associate minister in Kent.
Kent, Washington, associate minister, and then we had Brad Seward, ruling elder in Kennewick. So the three of them officially, and Ed, met with us as part of that committee to ask us all those questions, grill us a little bit, and we had a good time with those guys.
it also helps minutes with judicial cases, because if, he said, she said type of thing, what was accomplished, what really happened, we go back to the minutes, which the judicial committee can use, and, we can use, and all of that is to establish if everything is done proper order, and, all of
Right.
T's are crossed and the I's are dotted, and.
Right. And just a lot of little things you don't think of, like if you remember back in March when an article was published in Ordained Servant, the session sent a statement out to the congregation. Well, we should record that someplace that we did that, so that there's an action that we know that, hey, at this point in time, the session did X. Those kind of things that you want to keep track of, some of those details, so they don't get lost in the mix, especially if you're dealing with those later on.
I think it's important to note also in the records that it's not that we're putting in full conversations. We're only putting in actions, and it's very pointed, where it's not recalling all situations, especially counseling situations, discipline. It's just, this is the action taken, this was when it was taken, this was the decision, and it's pretty mundane, I would say.
It's not like reading an exciting novel.
Because, 2 hours of debate is gonna probably be 5 lines in the minutes.
If that, it will probably be what I read to you. The following was passed, or, the following was approved to be sent to the General Assembly.
It'll list out who did.
You know what I mean?
Who
Right.
did what,
Right, yeah,
who proposed the minutes.
yeah. But a lot of times it doesn't, General Assembly minutes are a little more detailed on like amendments that fail sometimes, but sometimes Presbyterian minutes don't have every amendment. If it wasn't passed or something wasn't changed, they don't record all those little things that we kind of get sidetracked on, so. Anything else on the visitation committee, questions about what they do?
Is that annually or biannually, or how's?
The visitation committee tries to get around every, 2 or 3 years?
About every 3 years.
About every 3 years, get to the churches. We have, I believe, 18 in our presbytery and 1 mission work.
So do they only
Right
visit
now.
churches in our presbytery, or do they do?
Correct.
Okay.
So each presbytery would have their own visitation committee, and they usually are the ones that read the record books as well. So they kind of check up on existing churches. Now, remember what I said earlier, that we're going to have the other, like a financial component to that, where if they're visiting with churches or churches make requests where they are, need funding and things like that, that we're going to erect this committee in order to help that, or fund, excuse me, to do that. But that'll fall under their duties as well. I already talked about the reports or greetings from the fraternal delegates, those 2 denominations. Special committees or commissions. So we had 2 reports. One was just a written one. So our presbytery handles installations of ministers as by committee. So like when I was installed here, then our session had to give a report on what happened. Usually it's kind of a listing of the order of service, what took place that night. So Reverend Barnhill, Drake Barnhill, was installed in January, I believe. And so that report was included in there of his installation. And he is in, who can remind me? Port Angeles. Okay, thank you. And then also the ministerial advisor to Portland gave a report, and that's where he said that they do have someone they're looking at that could possibly be a candidate for the church there. So I'll have to do one of those in the fall. I won't have a lot of information from July, maybe, or maybe we'll have a candidate already for Newburgh as well. And then just miscellaneous business, thanking the church that kind of hosted us. Next meeting. We have to adjourn by noon on Saturday at the latest. That's kind of our drop dead date, time, we got to finish. General Assembly has that too, and especially because people are flying out. So it's usually Tuesday at noon. We have to be done with everything. Only been to a couple General Assemblies where we're scrambling the last hour to be like, some of the minutes approved and different things that have to take place, but only one or two have been that way, that weren't kind of rushed. This is the third meeting where we have ended on Friday by dinner, so we were done about dinner time on Friday. We didn't have what can make meetings longer. I mean, we did have some debate on that letter that we sent to General Assembly, but what can make meetings longer is when you have exams, floor exams for theology. We do have a gentleman that's under care, not one of these two, but our third gentleman that's under care of the Presbytery, I think, is taking licensure exams in the fall. So that will be on the floor, where he'll have a theology exam that he'll be asked questions by the committee and then by anyone who wants to ask him questions so he can be licensed in the OPC. So some of those things take place, or you have to approve sermons. So they have to give a devotional, kind of mini sermon, if you will, as well as part of licensure. So there's a couple of, whether or not we have new ministers or people coming in, there might be those kind of things as well. Some messages, so that'll be some additions. Any other questions, thoughts? I wanted to do it this time when it was still fresh. We just got home, so I can rely upon everyone else's memory rather than taking the next week to go like, what did we do? And even though electronics failed me, I'll have my notes for another day.
Rather than going into Revelation for 10 minutes, can we just postpone that?
We are going to postpone that. That is a great idea, and I was going to do that because we're 10 minutes from the end of the hour. But I also think it's important because we are not just Covenant OPC. We are a part of a regional church. We're a part of a denomination. We kind of need to know what's going on in our church and our churches and in our denomination, and some of these things that are being discussed. I'm sure we'll have a much larger kind of report, Chris and I, when we come back from General Assembly, because I know of at least one other overture, so there'll be at least 3. We won't have probably dozens, but for us, that's a lot for the OPC. And so there may be more. And who knows, in some years you may have, I think the record was like 12 judicial matters that needed to be adjudicated that take a lot of time because you want to do it right. You don't want to rush through those things. So who knows if we'll have 1 or 2 appeals or complaints coming to General Assembly, or we'll have 10. We don't know. In fact, those things are going to the printers this week, so that pretty much the docket will be kind of set, other than late additions, which would have to have like a 2/3 vote to add anything in at this point. But so usually the commissioners will start. You can be praying for Chris and I. So in addition to Chris finishing out a semester of study, he's about to receive a packet of material that some years, we don't have any study reports, but it can be 200, 300 pages, 400 on a year where you got study committee reports and things that you need to kind of, at least I like to read through everything so I know what's going on before I get there, because you don't have a lot of time. But especially the committee you're assigned to for an advisory committee that you're going to be taking action on that first day. You kind of need to know what's going on, kind of the lay of the land and what's being discussed. And so a lot of pre-reading in the next month just to kind of prepare for that. In addition to everything that's going on. So yeah, being praying for that meeting that's coming up in a little over a month. June 3rd, I believe, is when that, the first date, 3rd through the 10th. We'll be flying out on the red eye on the 2nd, so you can pray that we can stay awake the first day. Anything else? Presbytery, General Assembly, questions, comments in the back?
So since we've got Mark Sumter now, I think you've been here a year? 2.
Almost 2.
Okay. I know that he's been in the budget, but for us being 30 grand under, when he's filling pulpit supply for a specific, like one mission church he's speaking at every other week, are they paying him, or is that money going to the Presbytery, or is it just a free deal in our Presbytery that the pulpit supplies get supported?
I don't know the specifics on that particular Bible study. I would think, though, as they're looking forward to denominational support, and I think at the last meeting we kind of reported some of this, that some of those numbers have changed, so they've got to have a healthy bank account. So I think part of the reason to have a regional home missionary who has a salary is that he doesn't need the additional support from mission work so that they can have the finances to call a minister. Because they got to get to a certain point where their giving will allow them to call a minister even with Presbytery and denominational support on that 4-year sliding scale.
And something too that we didn't mention during the conversation with finances is there are plenty of churches in our presbytery that haven't given at all yet this budget year, because it's in August is the end of the budget year, including ours. But that's because, like us, we do an offering in May, and then whatever budget line there is, that will all be sent together as one check, rather than doing monthly or quarterly giving. And so that is something else to look at. There's still plenty of churches that haven't given at all yet.
Through the fiscal year, right? Fiscal year is different than calendar year. And we started that this year. If you remember when the budget was presented, we started with trying to put a little bit into the budget for both the denomination for the thank offering we do in November, but also for our presbytery that is in our budgeted items, so a little bit of that. But also because we have been doing that thank offering in November, what we kind of wanted to do is kind of offset that by 6 months. That's why we're doing the May offering, so we don't kind of bunch everything up, be like, hey, can you give to this week and this month and give to that next month and those kind of things. But so we can kind of plan ahead as a church body to where we know we have an annual offering as well as what we can budget to go to our presbytery and then also to our denomination. For primarily the thank offering goes to worldwide outreach, and that's the committees of Christian education, home missions, and foreign missions, those 3 entities in the OPC.
Timothy, the Reverend Steve Bach is the other minister, and he, as far as I know, is just donating his time, and he's very passionate about getting that church planted. And him and Mark Sumter trade off so that they can preach, they can administer the sacraments, they can take on new members. As far as Mark's personal package is already established, paid for, if you will, budgeted for, as well as even his increase, trying to do an increase every year, even with the budget, that's all still in the works.
And I think currently, unless one of you can help a better recollection, but that study group or that group in there is like between 28 and 35 individuals on a Sunday, kind of mid-30s.
Yeah, they're really close on their savings, on their attendance.
Communicant. I think you have to have 20 adult members, a certain amount in the bank, and a certain amount in weekly giving to kind of say, okay, you can make up the rest. So the presbytery can give X amount, the denomination can give X amount, but now you guys can do that other part. And then where that weans off over that 4-year thing, then as the church can grow, then that church can be healthy and established and have the means to carry on. We don't want to just start a church and then be like, here you go after a few years, and they don't have the funds, the people, the things to kind of keep going long term.
Fly, baby bird, fly.
Right here, go. Any other comments? So these are good questions. If you think of anything along the way, please do ask. But yeah, just want to keep you guys informed on what goes on. So, all right. Well, let's close in a word of prayer. Almighty God, again, thank you for our presbytery, for the Presbytery of the Northwest. We do pray for our churches today. We thank you for all of the established churches in the Northwest. And for the busy week that ministers and elders had and traveling home yesterday, we pray that these congregations would rejoice in being able to worship together as the body of Christ this day. Again, be with our regional home missionary, his labors. Be with all of our committees and all the work that they do. In Jesus' name, amen.